Hi, and welcome everyone. My name is John Mastriani. I'm an assistant professor in residence of jazz studies and the associate department head for undergraduate studies here at UConn. We're happy that you are here to join us this afternoon for this wonderful panel discussion. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear from three esteemed UConn alumni panelists about their career journey and how their experiences and lessons they have learned may help our current and future students in music. During this program, our panelists will answer a variety of questions we have prepared, in addition to some questions from our audience. There will be time for additional questions at the end as well. And just as a little disclaimer, we are live in Vondermaiden Auditorium here with the UConn Jazz Ensemble, who is right on the other side of this screen. So it's great to have them with us, and we have some, of course, future members on the panel. So without any further ado, we'd like you to meet our panelists. So we'd like them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves, et cetera. So Giana, we'll start with you. Welcome and thanks for being with us this afternoon.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Giana. I played the double bass, and I graduated UConn in 2020. From there, I went to NYU to get my master's in string studies, graduated there in 2022, and now I work at Fischer Music Publishing. I'm a marketing coordinator, and I also freelance and play in New York City.
Terrific. Thank you, Giana. Hi, Michael. We'll go with you. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. My name's Michael. I am from the same year as Giana. I was a percussion performance and music composition BM. I also graduated in 2020, and then I went on to the Frost School of Music, where I got an MM in media scoring and production. And then I graduated there in 2023. And now I work back at UConn, actually. I'm not that far away. I'm just down the road a little bit. I'm in the Arjona building. I work in the communication department. For all you music students there, I'm the Emily Cole of that department. And I also freelance in Connecticut. I serve on the executive committee for the Connecticut Symphony Orchestra, and I'm on the board for the Rhode Island Recording Ensemble.
Terrific. Thank you, Michael. Colin, hi, welcome.
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Colin. I graduated in 2014. I did music ed and jazz studies. I'm a saxophonist, a woodwind doubler, composer. You kind of got to do it all. You learn from the best when you work with John at UConn. When I finished, I went on to pursue my master's at Juilliard, and I just recently completed my doctorate at Columbia. And I currently am a teacher, a band director of bands in the Darien Public Schools. I teach elementary band, and I also run an elementary jazz band. So getting fifth and sixth graders, rocking on the blues and everything. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to any questions and sharing all the knowledge that we have.
Terrific. Thank you all once again for the introductions. So if we can start with a couple questions that we've prepared. So first, and maybe you can kind of just chime in as you wish, just would love to hear from all three of you about each of the questions. So can you tell us about the steps that you took within your career to get to your current position? Anybody want to start? Whoever wants to dive in.
I would say, Michael, you got it.
Oh, no, I unmuted. We both unmuted at the same time. Virtual meetings. Yeah, so you can go first, Colin, if you want. I don't want to take it from you.
Definitely. Thank you. I would say in terms of the steps was really during my time at UConn, connecting with older faculty or connecting with older students, people that were a little bit further along in their career, just to see what the possibilities would be for me in the future. And I think a lot of that was, one, there's networking, but it's also you're working on your skills of being a good person, being a person that people want to work with. And that's a big skill that you need when you graduate, when you want to get a job, when you want to network, when you want to make moves to play in different ensembles, but also to build who you are, your brand. So I was able to, during my time, see from different people, whether on faculty, whether students, whether grad students, where their perspectives were, and especially their thoughts on what you can do with your music degree beyond what it might say on the paper. So say you get, you just get a Bachelor of Arts in Music, or you get a music ed degree.
Forced Lavery, please come to the front for pickup.
And like I said, I work at a school, so it's dismissal right now. But thinking about the ways that you might be studying music or doing this specific field right now, but expanding your possibilities. And I gained a lot of that knowledge by interacting with my peers, but also asking people who have been out of school and different positions to then think about, okay, how can I pivot in these different positions?
Please come down.
Yeah, I'll jump off what Colin said too. I mean, I totally agree with everything he said. And I think, even like obviously Colin said he was music ed and he's being a band teacher. I mean, and that's, like the direct line there, but there's also so many other things that you do, I mean, I actually started out as music ed and I ended up changing after one semester to being performance and composition, but I do not perform or compose for my primary source of income as an adult. Now I obviously work in administration. And you would look at that, usually you look at somebody with 2 bachelors in music and then a master's in music, and like, well, how does that even, where's the through line? And part of it is it only doesn't even need to be one. It's the skills you have and gain getting a music degree do not just apply to music, as I'm sure many people have told you before. And I didn't specifically see myself in this role until I got into my master's, when I started doing more admin work and I found myself being good at it and enjoying it. And here I am now, and we'll see where the future holds. But that doesn't mean I don't still do music. I'm still very active. I mean, you can't see these really, but they're posters from the Connecticut Symphony Orchestra that I play with, and I'm on the committee for, and I play with Capital Winds at University of Hartford, and the principal percussionist there. And then I also do recording with other groups. So there's so many ways to keep music in your life, even if it doesn't end up being your number one primary, like, I'm going to be a professional musician, I'm going to play saxophone for my life. Like, there's so many skills that go along with that and things that you can do.
Great, thanks, Michael. Giana?
Yeah, just to back off what both Colin and Michael said, at UConn, there are so many resources, and you have your professors, you have your fellow colleagues. And outside of that, I did an entrepreneurship minor and I did a human development family sciences minor. And I found that the resources in those schools as well, like, mesh together. Being a musician, working other jobs, trying to figure out schoolwork, and of course having a workload of 24 credits, and time management and being respectful to others, and all of that carries through your life. And yeah, number one thing I would say is networking and always keeping your connections and just being as resourceful as possible. And most people that you meet want to help you and want to see you succeed. And yeah, just keeping that throughout. It's great.
So many great things there. Networking obviously is a biggie. And Colin, I'm so happy you mentioned being a good person. And something I always preach to students and anyone is that if you're prepared, if you're ready to do the gig the way it's supposed to be done, you're on time, you have the right clothes on, you're here to do it to the best of your ability, to the people that you're working with and working for, you're going to work. That's what I always tell people. You're going to get the reputation of being like a really good person, in addition to the musical skills that you have. So some of those skills are sometimes we take for granted. So I'm really happy that you guys alluded to those points. So if I may ask, so all of you have done some really cool stuff in the music world. So what would be, if you had to name one, I know it's a hard question, what would be the best gig that you've ever done to this point? Could be teaching, could be playing. I know that's impossible, but all right, Giana, I'll throw it to you first this time.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I could pick one.
I know.
I would say, yeah. Well, playing for Phantom of the Opera on Broadway was it was one of my first big gigs, and it still lives to be one of my best gigs until they sadly closed. But you go through and you experience a lot of big fun gigs, and that's just part of life as a musician. And then you have a little bit of a lull, but I would say Phantom, or can I say two? I have to.
All right, go ahead.
I have to. I just played at the Hollywood Bowl for Barbie live in concert, and I was bass Barbie, but that was also really cool. Much different experience than playing on Broadway. So I feel like the two are don't go hand in hand, but those would be my two favorites so far.
So now, Michael, we have to give you two, just to be fair.
Oh boy. Well, I'll do this. I'll do one paid gig and then one that was not paid. I'll do that. My favorite paid gig I ever did was West Side Story while I was in Miami, which was a lot of fun because it also had been. I'll probably talk about it more later when we talk about some other things. It had actually taken a couple of years off from playing, not just because of COVID, because I was coming to my grad school was right out of COVID. But there were some other ulterior factors too. I really hadn't played at all for 2 years, and I got asked to do this community theater that was doing a production of West Side Story like outside in a park, which was kind of neat and cool too. It was with a full orchestra, not just a like a pit orchestra. It was a full orchestra, and I got asked to just do want to be one of the section percussionists for that, and I was scared doing it because it had been so long since I had played. But I found it is really like learning to ride a bike. It does not leave. And, it was kind of like, that was the beginning of me starting to play again and gig. And it felt really good to do that. It was a lot of fun. And then I'll say my favorite favorite concert or thing that I've done was actually with UConn was when I won the concerto competition and got to play vibraphone with the orchestra. That was definitely one of my favorite concerts of all time.
I would say one of my favorite performances really stemmed from a group that I helped start here at UConn called the Funky Dogs Brass Band. If you don't know about it, now you know. We shortly after I graduated in about 2014,
the white Suburban is here out front. The white Suburban has
Bring
arrived.
back memories, Colin. Bring back memories.
Okay. Shortly after we graduated, we had the opportunity to be in the horn section for Dispatch, late 90s, early 2000s band, and we played MSG for 2 nights. And it was what's the capacity? Probably 30, 40,000 in there or something like that. And it was sold out both nights. We got to play the intermission. We got to play outside on the concourse outside of MSG, and then also getting to play on stage and playing 3 songs with them. 3 different songs each night. So it was really incredible experience to have that so early on in my career. And I think my second favorite performance lately really was with Professor McDonald. Just recently, I had a quartet performance in Stratford, Connecticut, and it was a great opportunity to really try out some new tunes with a new band. That was our first time of ever playing together, and the vibe and the spirit, that kind of fueled me. I've now written about 3 more songs, so I'm hoping to get that band back together to record some stuff probably later this fall, early winter.
Great. And I'm sure you guys have a lot more stories to tell, and we'll get to some of those as we move along, I'm sure. So Colin, speaking of school and everybody, since you're in school, this kind of jogged this memory, but back when I was teaching public school, and the last gig I was in before I came to UConn, I was department head. And one of my roles was hiring new teachers. So whenever I was interviewing a prospective teacher, I would always ask this question. So what has been the most challenging part of getting to where you are in your career? Or what was the most challenging thing you've ever experienced, and how did you overcome it? So Giana, maybe this time we can start with you.
Well, I think we all can agree that a music degree in and of itself is a very difficult degree to pursue, complete, whether or not it's just a Bachelor of Arts like I did or Bachelor of Music. And I think that finding the drive to continue and following your goals and your passion can sometimes get a little jaded when you see what other people are doing and comparing yourself to others. And of course, if you want to come and live in New York City, it's very hard to live here and afford to live here, but you have to see the silver lining of all of that. And yeah, I feel like, especially with music too, as I mentioned, you get these big gigs sometimes, and then you have a lull of absolutely nothing, and it kind of makes you question, what do I want to do next? Is music really what I want to do? Do I want to find another path? And I think there's beauty in that because it opens doors and helps you explore. And especially at UConn, you have so many opportunities. And that was one of the reasons why I did a minor in business and just really explored my options, because I wasn't so sure on if performing was what I wanted to do, if I wanted to work in music business, if I want to do something completely outside of that. And, you know, now I'm lucky enough that I get to mesh the two together and I work at a music publishing company. But I think I'm still to this day, you know, trying to figure out what works for me. And that's, I think the hardest part is when you compare yourself to other people and their journeys. So just, I would say, stay on your track and, you know yourself best and keep going.
Giana, we had an impromptu conversation the other day. Do you mind telling everyone what you told me about the guy that texted you recently? Do you remember? Or we were talking about you hadn't heard from him in a really long time or something?
Yeah. That brings up another point of, you know, when you show up to a gig, to always be prepared, be on your best behavior, be respectful, and you never know what doors are going to open. You might think it's absolutely nothing that you're playing this gig, but I played a gig in April and we all exchanged numbers at the end. And after that, nobody really talked. And then out of the blue, 2 weeks ago, he texted me and he's like, hey, you know, I'm putting your name in for this gig. Hope you're around. Hope you're doing well. So, you know, just because you don't hear from somebody doesn't mean that you fell off their radar. And it's always just good to show up and be your best.
Thank you. Colin.
I would say staying true to your voice, staying true to yourself. And I know we can all at times be our worst critic. We can, you know, overanalyze. I had a professor once that said, was it overanalysis leads to paralysis? So if you continue, your brain will continue to spin ideas and spin different scenarios, different things. And I think there's a point in there where, yes, some of that is healthy, but you have to get to a point where you have to trust in yourself, trust in your skills, trust in who you are, and know where you are is where your feet are. That's where you are right now, and going from there, continuing to build, because there's definitely, you know, particularly for students that, you know, you finish undergrad and you're thinking about, okay, I want to go into a master's program, or I want to go into a doctoral program. There are going to be these stumbling blocks, these challenges, these moments where it's less of your peers and really yourself thinking about, how do I get to this next point? So I would highly suggest, you know, what really worked for me was continuing to surround myself with positive people that are going to encourage
17 and the Y
my
bus
development,
is here.
but
Last call,
people
17 and the Y bus.
that also
On down.
provided differing perspectives. So you don't necessarily want to be around people that are always going to be like, yes, that's great, that's great. You want to also have a community that is as kind of like a sounding board that you can really foster. And I know a lot of my best friends have come from my time at UConn that have really helped me in this path, in this journey, and finding ways to continue to seek out mentorship, especially now. You do that at this level. I have mentors from undergrad that I'm still in contact with now, mentors from high school, from middle school, people that you continue to keep in your corner that are looking out for your best interests, but having an opportunity for you to continue to go to them for questions and to think about ways to move forward. So I would definitely suggest all of those things in your development and path.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, so for me, so biggest challenge, we have a small anecdote here. When I was going to, you're all jazz musicians, so you don't have this as big of a problem with this as I did, but I was always really terrible at aural skills, ear training. Those, you know, Dr. Goldberg's great, but he couldn't save me. I was always terrible at it. And that was a big fear of me going to grad school. I was like, man, am I even gonna, like, you know, like, cause they have like placement exams, yada yada yada. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna be able to do grad school? Like, even though like I wasn't trying to do music theory or anything, I was film scoring comp major, looking at recording. You know, like ears are important there. But so when I went to Frost, it was the 2021. So we were coming out of COVID, so like classes were in person. still masks though. And so there were certain things that were still like fully online, and the placement exams were still fully online. And I remember being alone in my apartment in Miami. This is probably like literally within the first 3 days of me being in Miami. And we had 3 exams that we had to do. There was common practice exam, post tonal exam, and an oral skills exam, and you could do them in any order you wanted. And so me very stupidly was like, you know what, okay, so obviously I know which one I'm going to struggle with most. It's going to be the oral exam, so I'm going to do that one first. So I was like, all right, okay, you know, set up on my computer, I'm going to do this exam. So I start doing the exam, and it is the hardest exam I've ever taken in my entire life. I was shocked beyond. I was like, oh my god, like it was like playing, like it would be like fully orchestrated pieces of music. Like, you know, you're used to like piano chords, and I had practiced all summer like, oh, piano chords, what's the modulation, you know, like that, or like what chords are these. No, this was fully orchestrated music, and it'd be like, what was the applied chord that happened in that 30-second snippet of music? And I'm just like, I don't even know what key it was in. I have no idea, even like literally just no idea. And all the questions were of that level of difficulty. They were insane. And I finished that test. I got a 17%. It's the lowest score I've ever gotten on anything in my entire life, was that test. And I was freaking out. I was like, oh my god, like, if this is the standard, that like I'm gonna be like, I'm screwed. Like, how did I even get into this school? You know, like I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna be destroyed. And then I did the common practice exam, and I got 100. And then I did the post tonal exam, and I got like a 92 or something. And I was the only person in my cohort to pass either of those ones. Everybody else in my cohort failed both of those. And my cohort was 10 people in the Masters of Media Scoring Production. And I definitely had the lowest grade on the oral skills one. But even there was one guy who had perfect pitch, and even he got a 70 on it, and he had perfect pitch. So like, that's how hard this exam was. So I mean, that's my anecdote, basically just saying. And I graduated with a 4.0 GPA in that course, and I did great, and I was the go-to guy for a lot of things, especially like the tech related stuff. So my like long story short, basically saying that like, if you feel like there's something that you really just struggle with, that you feel like you just can't do, whether it's on your instrument or something else, and I just like, oh, I just can't do this, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fail at music, or that you can't do grad school, or that you can't be successful as a musician in other ways, because everything is a collaborative process. If I had to transcribe something for like one of my film scores or a recording project, I would not do it myself, because I'm not good at that. I know that I'm not good at that. So I would ask or pay or ask one of my friends who is good at it to do it, and I would in turn do something that they're not good at for them. You know, everything is a collaborative process. So I'm sorry, that was a long tirade, but
Oh, thank you. So we'll move on to the next question. So what experience at UConn do you believe was most helpful in helping prepare you for your future? Colin, you want to tackle that one first?
Absolutely. I would say the performance opportunities. I know I spent a lot of time. I'm hoping it's still there. The jazz room down in the practice rooms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We used to have the records and everything. And it was just, I remember spending a lot of time, practicing in isolation, playing with Jamie Imbecile tracks, or playing, having a session, playing with friends, and then realizing towards my sophomore year, junior year, I'm like, I need to perform. I need to take this music outside of this space. And I remember we had, I believe it was Lou's Cafe. There was like a Thursday night jazz hang, and the bottom of maybe the Bean, or one of the classroom buildings. And that just became such a scene where we would have we would have a rotating list of tunes that we would all learn, that we may have been working on in our lessons, and then we would be performing, and people would come and watch us. And obviously it was, it wasn't paid or anything, but it was the opportunity to perform and to really get ourselves out there. I feel like that was really huge for me during that time. I also am forever grateful to the leadership, the mentorship by Professor Marvin McNeil, who is now down in Atlanta, who was the former assistant director of bands for the UCMB, but also the founder of the Funky Dogs Brass Band. That collection of students that were all in the marching band during that period of time, to really inspire us to think beyond the classroom, to think beyond okay, we can play, we can learn New Orleans inspired music, we can learn brass band music, but how can we then take this and impact our communities? How can we get out and start a summer camp in Hartford and provide instruments? How can we take this around the country and around the world? And it's kind of grown from there, where we've been to Europe and back. We've been to California, Texas, all around the country and the world. So it's been an exciting opportunity that started here at UConn, and it's really the performance, but also connecting with my peers. So I think that's kind of been big factors in my development for sure.
Great, thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I would say the community aspect of being in a college. I mean, it's not necessarily unique to UConn, but UConn is great at it. You once you get out of college, you really do you start to. I mean, everybody looks back on their college days with such love, and obviously there are things that I don't miss, like homework, but like the especially if you live on campus, but even if you don't, is it's being on campus every day, having that place with your peers who are all doing the thing that you love, who are all trying to study and become better at the thing you love. You're all surrounded by those people. Take advantage of those things, being in as many ensembles that you can, go to as many concerts as you can, support your fellow classmates. And I think that's really important. I mean, I remember there was one semester at UConn where I was in 6 ensembles, and yeah, was that too many? Yeah, that was too many, and I never did that again. That was my second semester freshman year, so I learned my lesson. But the reason I was in so many is because there were so many available and offered, and especially as as a percussionist, I was able to sneak my way in. It's harder for some than others. If you're like a saxophone player, I'm sure you're into jazz combo, jazz ensemble, wind band, all these different things. But do whatever you can to get involved in whatever Like I know, one of my friends who was a percussionist at the time never thought of singing, but ended up joining Collegium and singing in Collegium. Like there's so many things that you can do while being a student that you are not necessarily as easy to do once you're not a student anymore. It's a little harder to easily get those opportunities and be surrounded by people that you know, and that community thing where it's like, okay, you can see who's in the choir and join the choir once you already know who's in it. Once you're an adult, it's a little harder to do that. If a community ensemble, like I'm in a bunch of community ensembles that I play with, and I sub in for some others, and it's great. But even now, like it doesn't have that same community. Like it's not like, I just remember so many great memories of, we're percussionists fooling around in the back during orchestra when we have 800 measures of rest. That doesn't happen as much as you get older with community ensembles and stuff, because the age differences between everybody is so different, because I'm playing with people who are in like their 60s, and there's so many reasons. So really take advantage of the fact that you're all together now in ensembles together and all in a similar place in your careers. That'd be my thing.
Thank you. Giana, last but not least.
Yeah, I have to say, cherish all of your moments at UConn. And I say to anybody, I'm so grateful that I love that school as much as I do, because I know that some people look back and they're like, oh, I'm so happy that's over. I loved UConn and everything it had to offer, and the people that I was surrounded with, and the professors. And of course I have to shout John out on this, like changed my life at UConn. But I would say, number one, when I was a freshman, I really struggled with time management because of the workload and being in all these ensembles, and then also preparing like the first or second week of school for auditions, for seating. And it's very overwhelming, and it's a big school, and you have your gen eds. And I took advantage of, I keep saying this, but the resources that they had to offer on their website. They had a sheet that mapped out hour by hour, day by day. And that's really what shaped me as the person I am today, because I made it through. And all of your credits never really end until maybe your senior year. But so that was number one. And again, being able to perform as much as I did. And I chose UConn because they allowed me to be a classical major, but also be involved in the jazz ensembles. And that was really important to me because I love both of those genres equally as much. And yeah, so that really has changed my career, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have gotten those experiences. And here, I would be here today, looking for that.
Great. Gianna, let's stay with you for 1 second. Moving from like the school experience. So what do you wish you knew as a student surrounding career or career preparation? So what do you wish you knew that you know now that maybe you didn't know back then and you said, oh, shoot, if I had realized this when I was a junior or senior in college, this would have happened? Anything come to mind?
Yes, I would say resume building and writing down, even it doesn't have to be every piece that you've ever played, but like keeping a notebook of maybe your favorite pieces, or making more recordings, like practice with your phone and record yourself. That is something that after UConn at NYU, I did learn has changed the way that I practice as a musician. I'm taking advantage of the Career Center because I waited too long to do that. And then I felt like I was kind of scrambling when I graduated, and also COVID happened. So people were getting jobs that were remote, but I definitely feel like taking advantage of those kinds of things and practicing. As much as everybody I know loves practicing, it makes a difference, even if it's for 10 minutes every day, like just keeping yourself prepared, because you never know when a gig is going to come your way. And then you go like a couple days, a couple weeks without touching your instrument. You're like, oh, I really need to pick this thing up and start practicing. So that's another thing that I would say is just always be prepared.
Thank you. Colin, what do you think?
Two things. The first would make sure that you're coachable and approachable. Make sure that you're willing to receive information at this time, because there's going to be a lot. And the second thing would be to save everything. I saved in my master's and my doctoral program. I saved every syllabus. I saved every essay I wrote, everything. And I kind of did that during my undergrad, and I wish I did it more, particularly when it came time to when you're applying for like teaching positions, or you're thinking about, okay, I did this assignment on making a lesson plan. There was this excellent template. Where's that template now? I eventually found it, but if there was a way to start that process of being super organized now, saving your materials, whether it's in a digital space or you're having hard copies. I'm still a fan of paper. Having both of those, just a way for you to keep that catalog, because I know years from now, or even my time being out 10 years, going back and finding, oh wow, here's my Theory 1 exam. Here's my ear training, like the weekly tutorials, I think they were called, and thinking about, wow, the growth and the progress that you've made as a musician and as a person. Having that information then was really helpful when I started to prepare for like the oral exams for my master's program, or thinking about different types of essay topics that I wanted to use for application essays. So that I would definitely encourage you all to think about.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, so sorry, something just left it. I would say music, technology, and business together. Both, they're things that UConn does not focus in. UConn's very classically focused, and jazz is getting better and better every day from what I hear, which is great. But going to a school like Frost after, and I'm sure Giana can feel probably the same way with NYU, like these schools that are much more focused on the contemporary side, or at least have that element to them. And I definitely think that's something that I did not get at UConn really at all, was the business and tech side. So definitely, as I don't know either whether it's taking a business course, I'm not even necessarily saying that I do recommend it, but I didn't until I was in grad school. But definitely technology, especially if any of you are comp majors, or even if you're jazz and focusing on jazz writing, know not just how to use Sibelius, RIP finale. I'm sure Earl McDonald is super happy about that. But learning a DAW now, like whether it's Ableton, Logic, Pro Tools, even Cubase, just knowing at least the basics, being able to record yourself, knowing how to make yourself sound decent in a recording, because it's getting more and more common to submit recordings for especially like auditions to grad school and things like that. And if you send in a quality recording, it instantly stands out from people who are just recording on your iPhone. Like if you think recording the audio on the voice memo on your iPhone is good enough for like an application, it's not. So that would be my biggest thing that I wish I knew back then.
Terrific. All right, how about one more quick question? And then after that, we'll open it up to our audience. And I would ask anyone that's in the audience, the Jazz Ensemble members, or anyone throughout the university that's listening in, if you have a question, please type it into the chat. And then we'll get as many of them in as we can in the time we have remaining. So just as one last quick question, what advice do you have for students or recent graduates looking to do something similar to what you're doing at the moment? So Colin, I guess we'll go with you first this time.
I would again echo the thought of reaching out to people you see doing the things that you want to do. That's it. If you want to come to New York, find the people that have come to New York, find that pipeline, talk to them, you know, set up opportunities for you to be in that space so you can get a clearer picture of what it might look like for you, but also having the opportunity to make sure that you get your stuff together. If it's you're going to be going to the New York scene to play, make sure you have all of your musical things going on. Make sure you have, you know, you're again being a good person, but have all of that ready to go so that when you get into these spaces, that you can make the most out of these opportunities. Because like everybody says, you know, you think, you know, the first impression, the way that you carry yourself, the way that people talk about you when you're not in the room, those are all things to think about, and I would encourage all of you to keep that in mind when you go forth. I would also think surrounding yourself and starting to build your community, kind of expanding your community, not just from who you know at UConn during this time. There might be students that you meet at Hart or at WestConn. You start to build out and branch out and build that network and create just a larger connection of folks that you can call on and interact with. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
Thanks, Colin. Michael.
So I'll speak to a little bit like freelancing in Connecticut and also like my job, which is very different than freelancing. Obviously, like I mentioned before, like I have 3 music degrees and I'm working in an administrative function. So I don't think your degree really matters when it comes to working in higher ed. The most important thing in higher ed is that you just have degrees, period, because it's higher ed. They want to see that you know how to get through higher education. Most of you are probably not thinking about being higher education administrators right now. I've met very few undergrads in my life who were like, yeah, I really want to be a higher ed administrator right now, but it's actually fun. I do enjoy it. And it's I don't want to say it's something that you can fall back on, but it's something that if you find yourself doing well in school and enjoying school, especially, I'm sure some of you are ed majors, teaching in a public school is not the only thing that you can do with education degrees. There is educational programming and planning, which is more like what I do at the higher education level. And it is a completely different type of rewarding. I mean, I don't work with students. So if your main thing is like, I want to work with students every day and that's what I love, it's probably not for you. But if just the idea of education in general is what really fascinates you and you want to be on a more, you know, top C looking down kind of way, I just recommend sticking with what you're doing now, and eventually it'll just kind of make sense. You'll know if you want to be an admin by the time you finish your undergrad or grad school, if you do grad school too. And in terms of freelancing in Connecticut, I highly recommend, and I'm sure, you know, I mean, old whatever, Facebook. There are a lot of Facebook groups that people post gigs in all the time. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my paid gigs for doing musicals just around. And whether it's high schools that don't have a percussionist and they, you know, pay me a few $100s to play percussion for a musical for a week, or other community orchestras that need a percussionist. It's how I've gotten almost every gig has been through a specific like pit. I think I forget exactly what it's called, but there's a lot of Facebook groups out there for that. And they're really useful.
Yeah, pit orchestra musicians. There's some kind of group out on Facebook that's called that, and they're always looking for people.
Yeah, and specifically a Connecticut one too. There's one that's just for like Connecticut or New England area.
Right. Okay, Giana.
Yeah. All really great points. Again, just to reiterate, being prepared and harping on what Colin said about your attitude and being a respectful person and showing up. Never show up to a gig thinking you're too good for it. Even if it's something that, you know, you're playing in a corner of a bar, like you have no idea where anything might lead to. So just always put your best foot forward. First impressions really matter. And yeah, just music is, you got to work for it. And it's so rewarding at the end. So just always, you know, like I said, follow your goals and dreams, and yeah, you know yourself, be true to yourself, and don't compare yourself to other people.
Great. I hope that everybody takes a copy of this panel discussion today and puts it in their back pocket, because there are so many pearls of wisdom that are coming out from you guys. We appreciate it very much. You guys are awesome. All right, so we'll get some questions from our constituents out in the audience here. So, and again, please feel free to type a question into the chat, and that will be great. And we'll answer as many of them as they can. So the first one is mainly for Colin, for obvious reasons, but what is your best advice for starting a jazz program for younger students in elementary and middle school and exposing them to jazz? So how would you go about that?
I would say the same way that you are learning jazz now, listening and providing opportunities for them to understand what is jazz, what, you know, here, getting them to listen to it more so than trying to put in front of them, here are all these notes and here's the scale and do this and go play over these changes. It's really more basic than that. Is that they're hearing the sounds, they're hearing the swing, they're hearing ideas, but then they get an opportunity to be creative. So recently I had, we played kind of jazz, not really, but I found on YouTube there was like a funk backbeat, and it was kind of similar to, like, you know, like a little bit like a Watermelon Man. And I gave the students just a collection of notes, not a scale, just like a collection of notes, really like 3. And I said, okay, we're going to be as creative as we can with our rhythms. Let's just start there. Then I said, okay, now we're going to use 2 notes. Let's be creative with these 2 notes. And then I'm like, okay, so now let's be even more creative with 3 notes. And what really happened for them in that process was I took the barriers down. If I just said, hey, just improvise, they'll be like, I don't know what to do. There's so much to think about. Really, when you break it down into those small, manageable chunks at that age, specifically for, you know, your 5th graders who might only have the range, you know, from concert B flat up to G or so, the first 6 notes that they've learned, thinking about ways for them to really engage with the music at the level that they're at is really the focus, I would say. I would also then, because this is really interesting, because my jazz lab is starting next week. And so I'm hoping this year to really bring in some guest artists, to whether that's a drummer to play along with my students, whether that's a bass player to play along with my students, a pianist to play along with the students, so they can start to hear and see the connections between what we're working on. I would love to talk about the blues, but breaking down the blues where it's not, okay, I need you to play this Charlie Parker line at 200, you know, like it's really going way more basic than that, just for them to be exposed to the music. And then, you know, over time, they'll start to pick it up a little bit.
Great, thank you. All right, this is for anyone, whoever wants to chime in on this one. So here's the next question. If someone had told you what you achieved as of now while you were still in school, would you believe them? If not, how did your goals change? Anyone want to have at that one?
I guess I'll pop in for that one a little bit, just because it kind of goes with what I was saying before, where I was a comp major, composition, and, you know, because UConn was because I was not doing jazz really, I had to take a few jazz classes as part of the composition degree, but I wasn't in jazz ensembles. I was very classically focused, classical mindset. And I, you know, was doing composition degree with Dr. Fuchs, who's amazing and great, and we still have a great connection there. But he's also very classically focused, you know, and I definitely, because of that, was very influenced by that and felt like I was like, oh, I'm gonna like write a symphony and try to, you know, get the London Symphony Orchestra to play. And that's where my mind was. And it's, you know, and it's funny because in my grad school, I kind of went back to being the media scoring side, the film scoring side, which is kind of what originally got me into music back when I was a kid with things like Lord of the Rings and stuff. That's why I originally wanted to write music. So it kind of came full circle that way. So I think as an undergrad, I probably wouldn't have seen myself. Not that I'm a full time, I'm not Hans Zimmer or anything. I don't write music for a living, but I do have like I one of the films I did music for just gone to the Toronto International Women's Festival. And I do some other sound work as well for films. And I don't think I would have, especially with like UConn not even really having like a specific film department, I definitely wouldn't have seen myself being able to do that and getting to, you know, go to like one of the best schools for it, media scoring. I mean, my professor was Carlos Rivera, who, you know, just recently won another Emmy, but is most famous for Queen's Gambit, the Netflix show. And I definitely wouldn't have believed that I would have gotten to do that. So I guess I would say I wouldn't have believed them. Wouldn't believe them. I probably would have believed you told them I was just an administrator, though. That part I probably would have believed. I would have been like, yeah, I like, you know, detailed controlling things. That sounds like me.
Great. Anybody else want to chime in on that question?
I can quick. I would say no also. I feel like Broadway is a dream for a lot of people. And the fact that I got that gig almost right out of grad school, no, I would have never believed that if you had told me that in undergrad. And going for my master's 100% changed a lot of my practicing habits and being a much more serious musician. As much as you have your undergrad at UConn and you are focused on performance, and there's just so much going on when you're an undergrad. And when you go and get your master's, since it's so refined, you really have just one thing to focus on. And of course, you have a much less of a workload, and you kind of realize that, oh, this is about to be my career, so I'm going to take it serious. So yeah, I wouldn't have imagined that I would have done all of these crazy things that I've now done, but it's just proves that anything can happen and change in less than a year. So,
well, I'm sure for all of you, the best is yet to come, I'm sure. All right, here's another question. Again, anyone chime in on this one. How much of your work with younger jazz musicians involve cultural context versus strictly musical content?
I would say you can't separate the history from the music. So they go hand in hand. And it really depends on, you know, the age level of the students. You know, obviously stuff that you talk about, the concepts or the history that you talk about with high school students is going to be drastically different than the way that you present it to a fourth or a fifth grader. So finding ways to be truthful for, you know, being honest, being truthful and communicating that with your students as much as possible, and having that additional context makes the music much richer. I've always been a fan of, you know, for any of the band pieces that I've worked on or any of the songs that I've worked on with my students, giving them that additional background as we're learning about the blues, or we're learning about, you know, the music of Miles Davis or a particular composer, or anything like that, finding ways to embed, you know, the cultural context within the music that we're working on. So it's not separated, because you can't really separate the two. They have to go together.
Great. Here's a fantastic question. I'd love to hear from all three of you on inflicting some personal bias here, but this is a great question. As a musician, life can be very busy. We all know that for sure. So what is some advice for handling work-life balance? So anyone want to tackle that one first? Again, I'd love to hear from all three of you. It's a great question.
I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's really hard. Especially when, you know, when you do have a full-time job. Like or really anything. I mean, even if you're freelancing and every night, like I have a friend who is in a band and it's really hard. I almost never see him because it's like I work a full-time job, so I'm working 8:30 to 4:30, and then his gigs are at night, and I was like, well, when do I even see him? And that can be a huge problem. I mean, like with my ensembles, I play in 2 ensembles. One rehearses Tuesday nights and one rehearses Wednesday nights. So man, like right now, like cause then I had, Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights. So like Thursdays, I'm like so dead. I'm just like, oh my God. I'm just like, oh, I just get to go home and I don't have to go anywhere. It's crazy. So it's finding that time to keep yourself motivated is so important. Make sure the things that you're committing yourself to are things you want to be committing yourself to. Learning when to say no. I just got asked by the Farmington Valley Symphony Orchestra to sub in and for an unpaid gig, and I just had to be like, no, I'm sorry, I just can't. Like, they wanted me to go to rehearsals and a concert, and as much as I would like to always say yes, because it is important to, like, especially when you're starting out, to take a lot of those gigs, especially when you don't have a connections in the scene. I got asked to do that because people in the orchestra knew who I was. So people already know me. But like when you first get those, if you're not already an established member, yeah, take those opportunities. But once you get those established opportunities, stay loyal to those as best you can, and don't just try to do too much. Because if you try, like, as another small anecdote, Rhode Island Recording Ensemble that I'm on the board for, we had a few people commit to being on the board a year ago who have just been very impossible to get in contact with. They've missed several board meetings, and we eventually just had to kick them off the board. And I'm sure they're good people, but they overcommitted themselves. They were like, they agreed to do something that they did not have the time to do. And because of that, I would be very wary of ever working with them on something or having them commit to anything else, because I don't know if I can trust them. So make sure you build that trust with people. Kind of got off topic there from the work-life balance, but basically just do not overdo it. Do as much as you can while still leaving time for yourself to be mentally able to do the things you've already agreed to do.
Right. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? It'd be great to hear from all of you.
Yeah, I would say make sure that you give yourself grace. There's a lot of times when I went from undergrad where I'm like, wow, I got 6 hours, I could practice all day, I can go to class, come back to another hour, do all these things, and then you get out into real life and you're like, okay, I got to go to work. Now my 6 hours is really an hour and a half, or it's really an hour some days. And so thinking about ways that you can then retool your practice sessions so that you're able to still I think it's like maintenance. You're still able to have your skills, and then on the days that you really have more time, that you can really expand on it, so that you're continuing to build the two. I would also encourage finding other things that you really enjoy besides music, and having activities, hobbies, things that are outside. Whether it's it could be running, it could be going to the gym, it could be anything, sport. It could be anything that you find that helps restore your spirit and your mental capacity to continue on in this journey. And balancing the two is again, like Michael's saying, knowing when to say yes, when to say no, but also knowing when you need to take that rest. And I've had some of my greatest practice sessions have come after, like, taking a period of time off, coming back fresh with new ideas, and feeling renewed in my spirit. So it's a balancing act, but you'll figure out the way that works best for you going forward.
Agreed on all of that. It is very difficult having a full-time job and still trying to be a musician, but like everybody says, you find what works best for you. How many times I'm like, oh, I really should be practicing right now and I have all of this time, but I just want to lay on the couch and watch a movie, and that's fine because it restores you and it doesn't push you away from your instrument, because I think that is something that could happen when you're not into it and you're forcing yourself and then you're like, I'm so not interested in doing any of it. But at the same time, like, I'm in my office right now, we're all in our offices. coming home after work, it's, you kind of, you're drained, like it's socially, it's a lot. But you come to find if you're not picking up your instrument every day after work, like you're starting to realize, oh, I missed that. And this is, you know, for me personally, why I'm in New York City is because of the music scene down here. So I'm like, what am I doing? As much as I love my job, like I need to make sure that I'm keeping up with all of that. So it's a balance. It's a hard balance, but it's manageable.
All righty, well, we are just about reaching the 11th hour, so I have one more quick question that maybe you can answer in just like a couple, 2 or 3 words or so, which I know is impossible, but all right, you're all working musicians. You all work and play music in some capacity. So when you show up on a gig or when you hire someone for a gig, what do you expect of that person when they come to the gig or the people that you are working with? So again, you know, a short and sweet answer would be great. So Michael, we'll turn over to you first.
Short and sweet answers are not my specialty, but I'll do my best.
Not mine either. I can relate.
It's not even just not even just when they show up to the gig, but even just responding to me asking them for the gig. The biggest thing is a decent response to the email. Learn how to manage your emails now, because the earlier you do it, the easier it gets. Filter them. If you're getting 100 emails a day from JCPenney, take the time to go in, unsubscribe so you don't see it anymore. Like, make it so when you get it, like I get buzzes for my emails. So every time I get an email, I know it's there, and I will either read it or at least open it and know I'm going to respond to it later. Figure that out now, because the communication, even before getting to the actual gig, to me is the most important thing for me when I'm working with people who respond and people who are detailed when they tell me, well, I'm going to be here. I expect to see them at that time, punctual. I mean, all the obvious things. Yeah. But my best advice now is figure out your email situation now. I'm sure some of you have 8,000 unread emails on your phones right now. Figure out a way to get through them.
Great point. Thank you. All right, Giana.
Yeah, being punctual, having positive energy, again, for probably the millionth time, being respectful, and if you get the music in advance, make sure you practice the music, make sure you know the music. Also, just speaking on the professional aspect, especially when you go to play on Broadway, like that has to be ingrained in your brain. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So definitely, if you have music ahead of time, practice it, know your parts, be vigilant, and yeah.
Thank you. Colin.
Absolutely. All those same points, being prepared. And again, being a person that can fit into the room, that can fit in with the group and understand the spirit of the music. No one player in an ensemble should be bigger than the other person, and you know, finding ways to make sure that this is collective. We're creating music together in this space, and I try to hire, you know, and I try to be that type of person, but I try to hire people that, you know, want to give back to the music so that they can give out to others and not make it about yourself in that moment.
You guys are amazing. Well, I will say on a personal note that one of the greatest joys of any professor, any teacher, and I'm sure you guys have experienced it already because you probably all have had students in some way, shape, or form, not necessarily, I mean, Colin obviously teaches school, but is to just see your students succeed in the way that they do. And although, Michael, we haven't had the pleasure of working together yet, I know since Giana and Colin have left college, I know Colin, I think, had the opportunity a number of years ago, you subbed a show for me, right? Down in New Canaan, I believe. So, and Giana and I are still playing some gigs together once in a while. So I can't tell you what a thrill that is to be able to sit on a stage and say, wow, these are my former students. And again, the jazz ensemble, who is right to my left and on the other side of the screen here, I often say to them, yeah, you guys are going to be taking all my gigs and it's going to be the happiest day of my life because I'm going to be, wow, you know, maybe we all had some really, really small part to play in your success. And it is a small part. And the biggest part, of course, is because of who you all are and your work ethic. And we know how incredibly proud we are of you. And it's all so wonderful to have you come back, and we appreciate the time that you gave to us this afternoon, and especially for the pearls of wisdom. And we wish you continued success, every good luck, and go Huskies. So we hope we see you again very soon. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jazz.